up, guys? This is Jules, and this is going to be a PvP build for MAGICKA in the Horns of the Reach patch. This build has a special focus on being able to play solo. It will also work in small group, and I think with a couple of adjustments, it will work in large group as well. But the main focus of it is being able to go out on your own and play your MAGICKA by yourself without the support of a group. So the reason why that is kind of difficult on a MAGICKA, and a lot of people might disagree with me because MAGICKA is generally regarded to be one of the more easy mode classes. However, I implore you to consider a couple of things about MAGICKA before just deciding that it is an easy class to play. If you look at the skill cost, and keep in mind I am in light armor, I am not in heavy armor, we have a 3k gap closer, we have a 4k execute, we have a 4k burst heal, our escape is 3700, and our purify is 3200. So we have some pretty expensive skills right off the bat. That's going to make it hard to sustain, and we're going to have to spec quite a bit of sustain in order to be able to accommodate skills like that. The other thing about MAGICKA that makes it difficult to play solo is the way that it heals. It is a class that is predominantly just a burst heal class. It does have some hots here and there. Purify, jabs, and entropy all give small hots. However, what you will find is that you end up on your back bar more often than you are on your front bar, which is obviously not very good for solo and not good for 1vx if you can't burst people because you're too busy getting bursted yourself. So the point of this build is to be able to switch to your offensive bar more often and to be able to open that offensive window that is so small on MAGICKA. So with that being said, these are the stats, and a lot of these are unbuffed, and I'll explain in just a sec. We have just under 36k max mag, 26k health, and 15k stam. Magicka recovery is 1700, spell damage 2500 base, and spell crit almost 40% base. So the reason why this mag recovery is so low, 1700 just sounds like not enough mag recovery, especially for a solo MAGICKA with skills that are very expensive. If you look at channeled focus, and I'm sure most MAGICKA know this, but you're going to be getting 120 magicka every 0.5 seconds, which equates to 480 mag recovery. Mag recovery is going to be calculated every 2 seconds, and that's how we get that number. We just multiply by 4. The other thing that is not appearing on the stat sheet is Honor the Dead, and I definitely would suggest running this if you are going to be solo, for sure. This is we can call it like a 4k cost, and if you multiply that by 0.60, divide by 8 and multiply by 2, you're going to see that this is going to be giving you back about 600 mag recovery. Again, not appearing on the stat sheet. So we're looking at 480, or we can call this 500, plus 600. We're looking at 1100 recovery that is not appearing on our stat sheet. So if you add that to this, and of course these are all very rough numbers, these are not perfectly calculated, this is just kind of giving you an idea of the true Magicka recovery that you're going to have. You add 1100 to that, you're looking at 2800 recovery. If you add a pot as well, you go up another 200, and you're looking more at like 3k mag recovery, which is a pretty far cry from the 1700 that we first saw. So basically the reason that it just doesn't look like it's as much mag recovery is because both Honor the Dead and Channeled Focus do not appear on the stat sheet. So that's why that is. In terms of spell damage, like I said, we have 2500 base. If we come over here, we get some Major Sorcery going. Major Sorcery brings us up to 3k. And with our weapon damage enchant, we go up to 3457. So now we are looking at, with just normal combat, using your heals, keeping up channeled focus, using pots, we're looking at 3k mag recovery and 3500 spell damage. On top of that, this crit that we have at 40% is actually going to go up to 50 with reflective light, or 49.6, excuse me. So all in all, with pots and even without continuous, these stats are extremely strong. 3k mag recovery, 3500 spell damage, and 50% crit on top of all the good max stats that we have. Resistances are going to be a little bit lower. We're going to have 20k on our front bar, 20 and 16. Back bar, we're looking at 24, 19, which isn't bad, but you are still going to have to be pretty reactive in terms of how much healing you're doing and how much damage you can take. If you are at 60 to 50% health, you are basically at risk of dying, and that's how you should think of it. So don't let yourself be there, and anytime that you are there, you should be swapping and healing. So that's pretty much it for the stats, and this is without continuous. I think at the end of the video, I'll go take a resource and we can see these stats with continuous. But we are running the Mundus of Atronach. I don't know what this is. Experience alliance points in gold. Okay, this is negligible. We are a vampire. This is going to give us a little bit of regen. It's going to give us the undeath passive, and it's going to give us mist, which is very, very important. We need that. And then we are running tri-stat food. So that's pretty much all the stats. Now we can get into the gear. We're running 5-piece Julianos. 2 of the pieces are heavy. I put them on the chest and the legs for max armor. The other 3 pieces are all light. On the Julianos, we have 1, 2, 3 impen, and we have 2 sturdy. The other piece that we have on the armor is Valken Scoria. This is going to be a monster set. This gives us max health, and it's going to be giving a meteor that procs off of dots. Valken is, I'm pretty sure everybody knows this, but Valken is very, very good for Magiplar. Like I said, it procs off of dots, and it does flame damage. So it synergizes on 2 different levels. The flame damage is going to synergize with this passive from our high elf. And then the fact that it procs off of dots is going to synergize with this skill, this skill, this skill, this skill, and this skill. So we're looking at 5 different ways to proc Valken Scoria on a Magiplar, which is very, very good. It's going to be basically procking on cooldown. In terms of the armor, like I said, we're running 2 heavy, 5 light. Everything is enchanted with Magicka, except for these 2 little ones right here. These are both enchanted with Stam. I mostly did that just because I'm a stickler about getting 15k Stam, and I don't like having less than 15k Stam, even if it's 14,999. I just don't like it. So you can potentially play around with 2 max stat triglyphs here, but I found that for me, the stats that I like them are basically best with 5 Magicka and 2 of the little pieces with Stam. So that's all the gear for the body. The jewelry, we're going to be running 3-piece Wizard's Riposte. These are all arcane. 2 of them are Magicka Recovery, and 1 is spell damage. When I originally ran this build, they were all Magicka Recovery, and the sustain was absolutely incredible. However, I felt that I lacked just a tiny bit of damage, so I went 1 spell damage. But if you're feeling like you need to sustain a little bit more, you can very easily switch one of those out. On the front bar, we are running Dual Wield. This is Torg's Pact. This gives us 129 spell damage. Both of these Dual Wield swords are Nirnhoned. The enchants that we are running are the Weapon Damage enchant and the Shock Damage enchant. The Weapon Damage, as you saw just a little while ago, is going to give us a lot of spell damage. And the Shock Damage is going to synergize pretty well with our Elemental Talent passive. Shock Damage just has a much higher tooltip than like Oblivion damage. So if you are running Oblivion damage right now, you should probably drop it for Shock if you are on a Magicka character, and especially if you are on a High Elf. So that's for the Dual Wields. Again, both Nirnhoned. If you do not want to purchase the mats to make these are both very expensive to make. The Nirnhoned, the Tempering Alloy, the Rubidite, everything. You can also run Sharpened Willpower. It's not going to be as good because Sharpened is slightly not as good as Nirnhoned. Sharpened does about 100 more damage for each skill. However, it does worse against shields and it doesn't affect your heals. But the damage difference, honestly, I think is negligible. So if you don't have the gold and you already have the Sharpened Willpower swords, it's really not a big deal. You can just run Sharpened Willpower. You'll have less spell damage, but you'll have more max Magicka. It ends up being not that big of a damage difference. Back bar, we are going to be running Sword and Board. The sword is going to be powered for 4% more healing. And the shield is going to be sturdy. You can play around with this. You can do impen if you want as well. I believe I have 4 sturdy and 4 impen. But you can do, usually I do 3 and 5. But you can do 2 and 6. It doesn't really matter, however you want to do it. We decided powered, of course, because it's a Magicka Templar. They have really good heals in terms of at least like the bursty heals. We have quite a bit of crit. We have some points into healing as well in the CP tree. We have minor mending. Power just kind of makes sense. at least how I see it. You could potentially put infused here and put the weapon damage enchant here and then put another damage enchant up here. However, I just like the ease of access of having the weapon damage enchant front bar, and I think the disease works back bar. You could probably run something else as well. This enchant can kind of switch around, but I like the defile of this, and the tooltip's not too bad either, so disease works for that. You could probably do like an absorb enchant as well if you didn't like that. Sturdy for the shield with a max magicka enchant, and that is pretty much all of the gear. To get into the skills real quick, we're running puncturing sweeps, reflective light, structured entropy, toppling charge, radiant oppression, and shooting star on the front bar. Back bar, we're running honor the dead, elusive mist, channeled focus, purify, purifying light, and spell wall. So just to get into why we're running each of these skills, obviously jabs is going to be our main damage. It's going to be proccing burning light as well. It's going to be a 70% snare, and it's going to be healing us for 36% of the damage done. It's a pretty good skill. Make sure that you're weaving in your light attacks so that you are proccing your shock damage enchant, as well as your weapon damage enchant. That's going to be adding a lot of damage to that. Reflective light, this is going to be an AoE dot. This is going to also help proc Valken, like I said before. It's also flame damage, which synergizes again with high elf. This is going to be a snare as well, and it's going to give us 10% crit, which is really great. That's what gets us up to 50%. For the third skill, we're running structured entropy. This comes out of the Mage's Guild line. This is going to be giving us our major sorcery or 20% spell damage. It's also going to be increasing our max health by 8%, which is nice on the front bar. You can kind of play around with this if you don't like this on the front bar. You want more health on your back bar, you can kind of switch this in Purifying Light if you prefer. I like to have a little bit more health on my front bar because it allows me to stay offensive a little bit longer, but that's just a personal preference thing. Toppling charge is going to be our only stun because Templar stuns are terrible, and it's also going to be our gap closer. And then we have Radiant Oppression, which is going to be yet another dot, and it's also going to be our execute. We are running Shooting Star here. Shooting Star is going to again synergize with High Elf because it is flame damage. However, you could potentially also run Dawnbreaker here if you prefer. It is a little bit easier to get the stun off on the Dawnbreaker because a lot of people will see the telegraph of Meteor and block it. However, I still like Meteor. I kind of go back and forth between these two, but I end up kind of liking Meteor a little bit better. Magicka Templar just has pretty trash ults in general. I mean, the only one that they could really run for damage would be, I guess, Empowering Sweep, which is really not a very good damage ult. Nova is going to be trash as well. People are just going to walk out of it, and then they have the heal ult. So it's basically between Meteor and Dawnbreaker if you would like to choose. You could go Bats as well, but I think you're going to lose some damage if you do that. But yeah, so those are the choices there. Back bar, we're running Honor the Dead. Like I said, this is built for solo, so I don't want to give up that 600 mag recovery. If I was running in a group, I might consider it because I don't want to be healing other people and not myself. And I think you could lose some recovery because you're, having to output less damage and you're having to heal less because you're intaking less damage because you're sharing that with your group. But for solo, I'd definitely go Honor the Dead. The heal is, still just as good, and it's also going to be able to restore that magicka, which is going to be pretty vital to you. Elusive Mist, this is going to be our oh shit skill. We are going to reduce our damage taken by 75%. We are also going to be removing snares and all that stuff from us. And we're going to be getting Major Expedition. A lot of the times we'll just kind of like, mist around a tree. One thing that you should know on Magicka Templar, which I'm sure a lot of you do know this, but Channeled Focus is one of the only skills that can actually return magicka to you while you are in mist form. Mist form is supposed to restrict you from not being able to get... Oh, we ran out of food. Mist form is supposed to restrict you from not being able to get magicka recovery. However, if you look, we are getting magicka recovery even though we are in mist form. It's still going up because channel does not appear on the stat sheet like I said before. And the Vamp Mist form will cut off your recovery, but anything that's not in your recovery is fair game in terms of recovering magicka. So that's just a little trick that you guys should know. And then we have Purify, of course, to get rid of snares and everything like that. And then we have Purifying Light, which is basically just one of our nice burst skills. Kind of just apply this to as many people that are around you, and then just be watching the timers and be doing your big burst basically when this is about to go off. So you put a Purifying Light down. You know, you see a person who is kind of struggling to heal themselves. You know, you have all your dots on them. Your spell damage is buffed, and you kind of drop a meteor, going with the toppling charge for the stun. It'll stun them, they'll eat the full damage of the meteor, and then the Purifying Light will go off, and then hopefully you can Radiant. So that's just something that you could do. But yeah, that's Purifying Light. It is undodgeable. It's actually a kind of broken skill. It doesn't have very many counters, but you kind of get to get damage where you can on Magic Templar, so I would run this skill personally. You could run Repentance on the back bar if you do not like this skill or you don't feel like you need it. I don't feel like I need Repentance at all, even though I absolutely love Repentance. So it's up to you. This is kind of a flex spot. Back bar, we're running Spell Wall. You could go back and forth again with this, between this and Bats. Bats is going to be really good as well. Both of them are going to allow you to go offensive. Spell Wall is probably a little bit better because it allows you to go offensive, like you swap and you have the block up so you can do some damage while you don't have to worry about your health. But it also can be defensive. For instance, say you're running out of stam and you have a spell wall up. Just pop the spell wall and get off some heavy attacks that you might not be able to successfully get off if you had a lot of people like doing damage to you. Like you might have had to have stopped and healed, versus with the spell wall up, you can just get those heavy attacks and sustain your stam, and it's really not too big of a deal. So those are the skills that we are running. The only skill, like I said, this one is a flex. It is very, very good. It's very good damage, so I think that you should run it, but if you don't like it, again, you can run Repentance. And then the other one is Radiant Oppression. If you feel like you're still not able to get onto your whatchamacallit, your offensive bar, even with the wizards, the damage reduction of wizards, you can run Harness Magicka right here. So basically it's going to be a little bit less damage, but you should be able to stay on your offensive bar a little bit longer because you have that shield. It's not the best shield in the world. I mean, you're not a Sork, but it is still 6k. So it's going to eat some damage while you do some damage, and you might be able to spend a little bit more time there because of that. I personally, I take it off and put it back on. It just depends on the kind of enemies that you're fighting and whether you feel like you're taking like a crap load of damage or not. So you can switch out the Harness Magicka, you can switch out the Repentance if you want to, and I don't think there's anything else that would really be worthwhile. Please don't run Dark Flare on a solo Magiplar. You will die every time. Javelin, it is probably a better stun than Toppling Charge. However, the issue with Javelin is that, let's see if we can just kind of demonstrate this. Javelin is a nice stun. However, this is what happens. This is how far they are away. You have to sprint to get to them, and then by the time you get to them, they've already CC broken. So it really just does not make very much sense for a Magiplar who has the majority of their damage is going to be melee range to throw your opponent even further away from you. I think that kind of makes sense. So yeah, that's pretty much all the skills. Like I said, you can kind of mix and match a couple of things here and there, but I would pretty much stick with these bars. Moving into the CP, running 19 into Bless for another 5% healing. And our heals are very, very good on this build with, like I said, with between 3k and 3,500 spell damage, as well as 50% spell crit, 19 into Blessed, as well as 15 into Quick Recovery. I've seen 13, 14 Breath of Life. So they're pretty good. They're pretty solid. Elemental Expert, 13%, 66. Elfborn, another 66. Spell Erosion, we have 3. We have pretty good spell pen anyway. We're in light armor, so. Thaumaturge, like I said before, pretty much everything on our bar is a dot, so 66 into this for another 22%. For the red tree, we have 56 into Ironclad, 20% less damage from direct damage, 37 into Resistant to get that crit resist up, 56 into Hardy, 56 into Ellie Defender, 15 into Quick Recovery, like I said before, really good heals. Warlord is going to be 34 for 14% break free. Split Arcanist and Mooncalf, 13% for each. 56 into Shadow Ward. I know that sounds like a lot, but you are going to be blocking a lot, and I think that the 20% reduction is worth. 2 into tumbling for 1% roll dodge. You do have to roll dodge sometimes, but please don't roll dodge that much because you're a Magicka Templar and you're not a Stamina Nightblade, and it's not going to really work out very well for you if you do. Just make sure that if you're roll dodging something really important. For instance, you know, a dizzying swing or something like that. That's pretty much all of the CP, guys. And that is basically the entire build. You could potentially run this in heavy, but you are going to really, really, really suffer in terms of sustain. So if you want to run it in heavy, you can, but like I said, you'll be tankier, but the sustain is going to be worse for sure. The other thing, what else? There was one more thing that I wanted to say. Actually, I don't think that there is. Oh, and I will do the stats. I will clip this and I will go take a resource and we will do the stats for continuous real quick. Alright guys, so these are the stats with continuous. As you can see, we've gone up to 2,000 magic recovery unbuffed, 2,700 or almost 2,800 spell damage unbuffed, and 41.6% crit. So just to buff up a little bit. Okay. I didn't really see that. Okay, things are dying too fast. I'm pretty sure it said 38. Yeah, 38.89 for the spell damage. That's with the buff and with major sorcery. Yep, 38.89. That's going to be our max. For the recovery, we are looking at a max of with pot and then adding 1,100. 23 plus 1,100, we are talking a maximum of 3,500 mag recovery, 51.6% crit, and 38.89 spell damage. So those are the final stats with pot and continuous, guys. I hope that you enjoy this build. I also just want to say thank you to both Luke and Bouncy for helping me theory craft and test and fund a lot of the different tests that went with this build. I appreciate both of you very much, and thank you for your help. And that's pretty much the entire build, guys. I hope that you enjoy. Sorry it's been kind of a longer one, but there was a lot to kind of go over, especially for Magiplar. If you have any questions or feedback or anything like that, you can leave a comment below or contact me on Twitch or Twitter. And that's pretty much it, and I hope you have a great day.